2022 was a busy year for Spider-Man and for his villains. Welcome back, Nerd Squad, it's me, Amanda! In 2022 we saw the return of some old classics and also the introduction of some really great new villains, who I honestly hope stick around, or for those who were defeated, return again, because they were so great. Who is your favorite Spider-Man villain and why do you love them above all others? Number 10. Hobgoblins. You heard that right. What's worse than one hobgoblin? Well, how about two hobgoblins? In the recent Amazing Spider-Man series, Hobgoblin returns in issue number 11, but he isn't alone. Over the years, there have been multiple people to carry on the mantle of Hobgoblin, and in this case, there are two people that end up returning at the same time, making the villain even more deadly since there are not one of them active at the same time, but two. Ned Leeds, this time around, is once more brainwashed into joining up with Roderick Kingsley, but even still, together they both give Spider-Man a run for his money, causing Norman Osborn, who's actually currently good and sponsoring Spider-Man and giving Peter a job, to call in reinforcements. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love Spider-Man, be sure to show your love by clicking that subscribe button. Number 9. Queen Goblin. Queen Goblin. Oh my goodness, I love her design. So cool! Queen Goblin is basically evil Ashley Kafka if she was combined with Norman Osborn's sins, which initially, I'm not going to lie, I kinda thought that the Beyond Corporation combined her with a piece of the Carnage symbiote, but I digress. Dr. Ashley Kafka actually has a history with Ben, as we learn in his own miniseries, which made her transformation into Queen Goblin that much worse really. Although to be fair, this isn't actually the Ashley Kafka, but instead a clone version of her, as the original Dr. Kafka is dead. This clone was actually released by Norman Osborn, who came across her in an old lab belonging to the original Jackal, aka Miles Warren. As Queen Goblin, thanks to her combination with the sins of Norman, Ashley has powers similar to him while he's hopped up on the Goblin formula. I guess the Goblin formula is also a sin of his, so this seems to make good old weird comic book sense to me. Other than the usual Goblin stuff, Queen Goblin also has her Goblin Gaze, which allows her to prey on the negative and often remorseful thoughts of her victims, attacking them psychically and often making them turn on themselves. I don't really know where this power comes from. It could be a product of Dr. Kafka's psychological know-how combined with like the Goblin formula, or something Maxine Danger sprinkled in. She did say, you know, it's basically like a designer villain she made herself, so who knows what that means. Number 8. Venom. Venom for the last decade and even before has been moving ever closer to full hero status. And yet, this year we saw him return to an earlier state in terms of his relationship with Spider-Man, and kind of in terms of his relationship with himself, but that's more about the Venom series. Venom was originally known as being an enemy of Spider-Man. This was actually because the symbiote found camaraderie in Eddie Brock after being rejected by Peter Parker itself when the symbiote came to Earth the first time. Well, at least the first time in terms of our comic history, but not really in terms of like the symbiote's retcon character history. Yeah. Eddie and the Venom symbiote actually bonded as a result of their shared hatred of Spider-Man, and thanks to an accidental trip to Limbo and some meddling from the Goblin Queen, Venom now has reverted to this characterization, with Eddie even referring to himself and Venom as we again in the comics. But the really weird part is that Eddie actually isn't even really bonded to Venom at this point in time, as he's the King in Black, in essence becoming one with all symbiotes. So, super weird once he realizes he's kind of the only one in there. He's like, what? Number 7. Sinister Six Super Adaptoid. The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid was pretty cool to see as it graced the pages of Zeb Wells' run on Amazing Spider-Man last year. The issue it appeared in advertised a potential 7th member of the Sinister Six, with the cover reading, "The Sinister Seven?" The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid, as it turned out, was not a 7th member, but instead a combination of all 6 members of the Sinister Six in one neat AI package. However, for all the power it boasted, its weakness lay also in being an amalgam. Because what have we learned about the Sinister Six at this point? Well, we've learned that teamwork isn't exactly their strong suit. But I mean, if it was, Peter would be in some real trouble here. He probably wouldn't even still be alive. The Sinister Six Super Adaptoid was defeated by the combined efforts of Spider-Man and the Sinister Six working together, and ultimately ended up turning on itself and then tearing itself apart. Although it turned out there was actually someone else behind this machine who was even more of a threat to Spidey. Number 6. Hallow's Eve. Who is Hallow's Eve, you ask? Why, none other than one of my favorite, often untalked about characters from the comics, Janine Godby. One of her names. She's had a few names, but I'm just gonna call her Janine because I know that's what she prefers. Janine made her return to the Spider-Verse during the Beyond event. She was once Ben Reilly's girlfriend, but after turning herself in for killing her father, who had severely mistreated her, she ended up spending a long time in prison. The Beyond Corporation managed, however, to work out a deal with the state to allow Janine to be put in their custody, allowing her to be with Ben once more, but also forcing her to live basically under house arrest. I mean, it was a beautiful condo in New York City that I'm sure most of us would willingly allow ourselves to be imprisoned in, but at the end of the day, a prison is still a prison no matter how nice it is. Janine and Ben would eventually discover the dark truth of what Beyond was really up to and turn on this organization, with Janine escaping their custody. During the Dark Web event, she is transformed by the Goblin Queen into Hallow's Eve, using the magic of Limbo and the demon Sim. As Hallow's Eve, Janine can create masks to use that basically give her different kinds of powers depending on the mask that she's using. Number 5. Sinister Six. The Sinister Six recently fought against Spider-Man once again. This time around, the team included Dr. Octopus, Kraven, or well, Kraven's last son really, since Kraven is currently no more in the comics himself, Mysterio, Electro, Vulture, and Sandman. And the team was actually being held against their will by the Ultra Living Brain when Spider-Man faced them. In fact, he teamed up with them in this issue to face the Sinister Six Super Adaptoid powered by the Ultra Living Brain initially. But when he chose to show this new sentient AI being Mercy, the Sinister Six decided to turn on him. They beat him badly and were about to kill him, and if it wasn't for the intervention of the Ultra Living Brain themselves, the Sinister Six may have even succeeded. Fortunately, it was able to contain them and ship them off back to where it found each of them prior to their kidnapping. Although, honestly, Spider-Man would have rather the Ultra Living Brain packed them up and sent them off to jail, but. Number 4. Ultra Living Brain. The Ultra Living Brain was the creation that followed in the footsteps of the Living Brain, and the Living Brain is a really old foe that Spider-Man once faced years and years ago now in terms of comic book history, first appearing back in issue number 8 of The Amazing Spider-Man from the 60s. The Living Brain has appeared since then, but when it comes to Spider-Man villains, tends to reside among some of the most, well, forgotten, having appeared in less than 50 issues since its first appearance back in the 60s. The Ultra Living Brain is in essence its child. It was created by the son of the creator of the Living Brain, Dr. Petty. Dr. Petty's son, Randall Stephen Petty, had tried to make a new Living Brain in the past, and once again, compelled to continue his father's legacy, this time around built the Ultra Living Brain. The Ultra Living Brain eventually became powerful enough to kill its creator, albeit kind of accidentally. It impersonated Petty and used Stephen's resources to find the original Living Brain, becoming obsessed with continuing its legacy by answering the question, who is Spider-Man? Number 3. Chasm. Chasm is Spider-Man's current nemesis in the Dark Web event. I would argue his main nemesis. Chasm was once Spider-Man's clone, Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly made his return seemingly back to being a hero in the Beyond event. In this story, a mysterious corporation known as Beyond hired Ben to become their new Spider-Man after acquiring the copyright to the name. As Spider-Man, Ben became like a corporate superhero. Everything he had was paid for by the company, with them helping him, seemingly, to get to where he was needed most and in his fight against criminals and villains. In reality, however, Beyond was manipulating Ben, and while doing some good, was actually more focused on advancing their own nefarious plots and experiments, and kinda creating villains. That's also a thing they do. After having his memory severely damaged, Ben faced off against the original Spider-Man, Peter Parker. At the end of their fight, Ben's will to live was called into question, and he ended up sacrificing himself, allowing himself to seemingly drown in toxic green goo. In reality, he did not die, but was reborn again as the villain Chasm, who has returned with new weapon-oozed powers to get revenge on Peter for stealing his memories. Although Ben seems to be remembering that wrong, to be honest, but doesn't really matter because that's what Ben thinks happened, so. Yeah. Number 2. The Goblin Queen. The Goblin Queen is actually one of the most powerful foes that Spider-Man has had to face this year, and likely one of the most powerful foes he has had to face maybe ever. With the combined power of Jean Grey being her clone, and the dark demonic power and demon army of Limbo behind her, Madeline Pryor feels pretty unstoppable here. At least that's how it appears thus far during the Dark Web event. At the time of this recording, we're only a few issues into the Dark Web event, so keep that in mind. Although when this goes live, the event will be probably more than halfway through, I think. I'm still not completely convinced that this is really Maddie, considering what has been going on with her in the New Mutants series, where she truly seemed to be committed to turning over a new leaf. But hey, here we are. And if this is actually Maddie as it appears to be, Spider-Man is going to have his work cut out for him when it comes to defeating her alongside Chasm and Venom and Hallow's Eve. Goodness! Number 1. The Beyond Corporation. The Beyond Corporation was probably one of the coolest new villainous organizations to rear its head in the Spider-Man comics in 2022. And the super cool thing about it, it's not actually as new as you think. If you were just introduced to the Beyond Corporation via the Spider-Man Beyond event, you might be surprised to hear that it's actually been around since 2006 in the comics. Beyond has only made less than 40 appearances, but its first appearance actually happened not during the Beyond event in ASM and the Point Bays, but back in Next Wave. Beyond actually gets its name from the true all-powerful beings behind it, who are, you guessed it, Beyonders. So while Maxine Danger might send a shiver down your spine, I know she did mine, the real danger isn't even just in the corporation or those who manage it, but the cosmic threat behind it all. And while Beyond might be gone for now in the comics, I'm more than certain that the Beyond event isn't the last we will see of the Beyond Corporation. Even though they were defeated, they really created a lot of problems for both Peter Parker Spider-Man and Ben Reilly when he was recently Spider-Man. So I feel like we also have to take into consideration, although they didn't win, they caused a huge ruckus. That's all the time we have for this video, folks, but until next time, you keep thwipping on and stay nerdy, YouTube.